Let's do it.
All right, joining us now. He is the man, the myth, the Mr. Alabama, if you will. You've seen him everywhere on SEC Network Plus. He's also on the radio with Tom Canterbury, part of the Alabama radio crew. So he's going to be busy this weekend in multifacets this weekend for the big Alabama LSU series. It feels special when we say LSU and Alabama, regardless of the sport, but especially here in softball this weekend at the Roadhouse. Should be electrifying. I speak of our good friend Gray Robertson, who's wearing a lot of hats. We don't know if we'll get into all the hats he's wearing, but we'll get to some of them. How you doing?
I'm fantastic. How are you?
I'm doing good. What's it mean to you, Alabama LSU? When I say that matchup, we all know what it means in football. I've been to an Alabama LSU football, so I know how special that is. But it's just equally as special in softball, isn't it? Give me your thoughts on this weekend.
It's always been tight. It means a lot to me. The LSU series in 2017 was the first radio broadcast I ever did with Tom. Back then, Game 3 of that series that Alabama won in on Sunday to win the series 2-1. It has been a rivalry over the years that has meant so much in the SEC race. Alabama historically has not had a lot of success in Baton Rouge, but clinched the SEC championship in 2019 on their field, LSU's. And then LSU is one of the only teams in the SEC that has a winning overall record against Alabama. So it's always been tight. Every game has always been interesting and fascinating over the years. We saw in 2021 a non-conference little series that happened between these two. Last year, LSU gave Alabama their first losses. So there's always some intrigue when these two meet, and you've got two programs that at least makeup wise have been similar for years, typically led by star pitchers with these all-American hitters who have come through over the years. And it's, I'm sure, going to be another fun addition to that rivalry this weekend.
No question about it. By the way, folks, if you're wondering, Tom Canterbury is a busy man. He's not with us. He's because he's busy. He's not because he's mad because I beat him in the trivia when I was on the out of the box trivia. Right? I mean, just to clarify the speculation. He's not boycotting this episode because he's mad that I beat him in the trivia.
Not at all. Tom is over it. He and Matt. If anyone is mad, it's Madison Shipman. That is who is carrying the grudge. But Maddie's cool with it. We've joked about it a lot since then, so everything's fine. Congratulations again on your title, Eric.
Thank you.
Just 2-1.
Hey, it's all about the score. Who scored more? That's all that matters.
That's
not
right.
The margin of victory. As long as you get in the top. But obviously, these two teams have high expectations and have fan bases that expect high expectations. And how would you classify these two teams going into this? Because there's been some ups and downs for both of these teams, but yet I feel like these are two teams that, when they get to the NCAA tournament, there's still teams that are like, that they can make some noise. So what's been your thoughts on the Tigers and the Crimson Tigers? I think it's a big series for both teams from that standpoint to kind of build some momentum for the SEC tournament, try to lock up a high national seed, perhaps make a push for a top 8 seed and put themselves in position to be home. What's your thoughts where the two teams are at?
I think it's remarkable how many storylines are colliding with this series. You talk about just first off, the close-up, the SEC standings, you've got two teams that are in a position to maybe get a bye. They will need a little bit of help from some of the teams above them, but basically the loser of this series is out of a chance to get a bye in the SEC tournament based on my rudimentary math. And then you look at the NCAA tournament prospects here. LSU is a team that, I don't know about you, I'm sure we'll talk about it later. They're right on the fringe for me. I think you've got 6 top 8 locks and then 2 spots that are a little bit softer, and LSU currently holds one of those softer spots. Yeah. A road series at Alabama, you win that, you're probably locking up a top 8. Perhaps. We'll see what else happens around the country. Alabama probably missed their chance to creep back into the top 8 because of the series loss to Auburn. I think the math still showed a path there if they had won that series, but that path is much, much murkier now. Still, though, you win this series this weekend, you probably lock up a top 16 seed, barring maybe a disastrous weekend in Oxford. So there are a lot of things that both of these teams can solidify. I think, also you can look at some of the individual stuff. Some of the SEC awards could potentially be on the line this weekend. But there's just so much riding on this, and we've seen two teams that have been a little tough to figure out. LSU looked a lot better, obviously, with Taylor Pleasance being able to actually swing, when hitters can actually hit the way they want to. shocker, success comes. I still have some questions about their pitching and the overall health of that staff. And then with Alabama, I mean, Montana's Montana. And this is a team that has been so close so often. I've been describing it to people lately as, Alabama right now just has a scoring problem. It's not a hitting problem. They're getting the hits, they're just not scoring. And once those runs come, that's when the Crimson Tide can become really dangerous. So I think we're going to see a weekend where there's so much on the line and something's got to give with Alabama. Will they finally be able to break through? LSU, are they finally going to be able to pad the quality wins that they need to secure the spot that the RPI keeps saying that they've got right now in the NCAA tournament? I'm fascinated by this entire series.
I am as well, and I think it's going to draw a lot of viewers. I think the Saturday and the Sunday games are on ESPN2 and ESPN, respectively. Friday night's games on SEC Network Plus, which you'll have the call there. Then you'll be flipping over to the radio side with Tom Saturday and Sunday. But these are two programs that bring eyeballs, that bring the casual fan. And that's just been even proven again with the article I wrote on Extra Innings Softball, where Alabama-Auburn drew the third largest crowd viewership in television this season for a softball game. It crushed head-to-head the Vanderbilt-Tennessee college baseball game, which you and I do some baseball on the side. Tony Vitello's a big story. Tennessee's a lightning rod. Tim Corbin, that's a big series. Softball crushed it, more than doubled the audience. And Alabama this year has two of the three most watched softball games with the Florida State game in Clearwater. And LSU brings a big rating as well. So this could be another one. This is one that's going to bring a lot of eyeballs for both as well, the casual fan.
And I think ESPN recognizes that. They've got Beth Mowins and Michelle Smith coming to town, so the A team will be here. It's not a surprise to see that Florida State game still be at the top. That, of course, the primetime game in Clearwater, that's been drawing huge numbers for the last few years. But I think people like to watch the players that they care about. And a lot of people really care about Montana Fouts. And we have seen, her pitch in those two games that are in the top three. And she's one of the most recognizable faces in all of college softball. LSU is going to bring in a big draw as well. I think also if the game is good, frankly, people are going to tune in. As much as it pained me to call that Sunday game the loss to Auburn, it was a good softball game. It was tight. It was exciting. There were chances for both teams right up until the end. It was an awesome game. I had people who are Alabama fans texting me saying, I hate that we lost, but my gosh, that game was awesome. So people are going to pay attention if the game is good. And I hope, I said ESPN's paying attention, sending the A team. I hope that they're paying attention to the overall story that these ratings are telling, because I don't have the math in front of me, but I know we've seen fewer linear games up to this point. And I hope that that is not the case going forward, because the numbers show that the people care about softball once it's on TV, especially good softball. You put the right games on, people are going to pay attention.
I agree, especially on the ESPN letter. You and I travel a lot. We go to a hotel. What's the first channel it's easiest to find is an ESPN. And I made the note in the article. It also beat the XFL and the USFL in cable ratings. And I said that because the XFL, honestly, has taken some of those slots away that you're talking about. So that's a great point you make. I want to ask you about the state of Alabama, because you've now spent a lot of time in the state of Alabama. You live there. You breathe it. You've covered it. You broadcast. You got to, one of your great honors, I know, in your career, you got to call last summer the championships there in Birmingham, the U.S. beating Japan, which turned out to be Monica Abbott's last game as a U.S. national team. So props to you and Caleb Bro for that. Speak to the passion of softball in the state of Alabama, because we hear it from the mainstream media about football, and rightfully so, every day, how it lives and breathes football. But softball is up there as well, especially in the women's sport, isn't it?
Absolutely. And, I've ever since I started broadcasting with Alabama, all the softball games, I've seen huge crowds. I've seen the roads magic. I've seen the people flock to the stadium for these games. But I think it kind of really hit home in 2021 during the SEC tournament when I could not get a parking spot. And I get there early. We try and get there 2 hours plus before first pitch. And for the SEC tournament, it was, maybe even 30 minutes before that. So we can watch whatever game is before, get some notes down, all that fun stuff, chat with whatever TV people are there. And I couldn't get a parking spot. And people were lined up down the street, all the way down to the street, to the stoplight, and then up under the bridge, almost up to the highway. It was crazy. And these are people lining up for an SEC tournament game. They did the exact same thing for regionals that year and super regionals. And then we saw the same thing this past weekend with the Auburn series. People were lining up hours and hours before the games even started. That Friday game, initial first pitch, 8 o'clock at night, local time. The first chairs that were put in line to save spots, 9:30 a.m. local time. I mean, it's crazy. The people here are so invested. They care. They show up. They know what to do during the games. They know when to be loud. They know what to say. They know when to cheer. And then to see that expanded at the World Games this past summer was really incredible. And we've joked a lot about moving from OKC the World Series so that Oklahoma doesn't have home field advantage. But honestly, if there is any other alternative to the Women's College World Series being played in OKC, it's probably the Hoover Met, because the facility there, the atmosphere that they were able to cultivate, the field that they were able to build just specifically for softball was really, really incredible. And the people in the state showed up for that game despite rain, despite delays, despite a lot of things that might have kept them from coming. And it really is just fantastic to watch every single time I see a game in the state, and I expect nothing less from the crowds this weekend for the LSU series.
And one of the people they love to see is Montana Fouts, who's having another great year. He's had to carry this staff, and I think still has a shot to win SEC Pitcher of the Year and be in the mix for National Player of the Year, which I think is a little more wide open than past years, where it's pretty much Jocelyn Alo or Rachel Garcia's award. Ashley Rogers didn't pitch much in the Florida series. We don't know how much she's going to pitch moving forward. You got her, Rogers. You got Fouts, Penta from Auburn. What's your thoughts first on Fouts' year this year and what she's had to do with this young staff?
I think Montana is having her best year in terms of execution of pitches. She's given a couple more home runs than normal, but overall, to watch her do what she's doing against teams who have seen her multiple times is really, really impressive. Some career best numbers in SEC play, pretty close to career best in overall season statistics. The strikeouts are just incredible. I don't know how she keeps doing what she's doing. And there have just been a couple losses that she's taken where maybe she's made one mistake and Alabama's offense wasn't able to help her out. But I think Montana is pitching as well as she has throughout her entire career. And if she can keep it going, then who knows where Alabama could finish up this season. I'm interested in the SEC Pitcher of the Year race. In my opinion, I think Montana's chance at that might have gone out the window, losing the Auburn series and losing head-to-head to Maddie Penta, who I think probably has the edge here. But also, it's the interesting voting factor, right, of what the coaches want to award, because typically the SEC champion gets something, right, in the awards conversation. Kiki Malloy is probably not going to win SEC Player of the Year, so do they give Ashley Rogers Pitcher of the Year because Tennessee deserves something? I don't think they have anybody in the mix for Freshman of the Year. So I don't know. I mean, the Pitcher of the Year race is really interesting, but to me it's probably down to Penta and Rogers. Fouts can get back into it if she gets a little help from, say, Arkansas or Auburn's opponent this weekend, which is, as I look at it, South Carolina. So you might need some help from the teams playing the other two contenders, but right now it feels like it's Rogers and Penta.
What are a couple questions or keys you're curious for Alabama down the stretch here that is going to define this team? Obviously, Fouts is going to do her part, everything. But you mentioned earlier, you think the offense is hitting, they're just not scoring because they're just leaving runners on base. What about the pitchers behind Fouts? What's the thoughts on the Crimson Tide 2023 keys to success here later down the stretch?
Well, the biggest thing to me is something that I'm still waiting to hear about, and that's the health of Ashley Prangy. If she's unavailable, then all the offensive points that I might make in a minute or have already made are moot. When you're missing your home run leader and RBI leader, it's going to be harder to score. It just is. That's a statistical fact. So Ashley Prangy needs to be available at some point in the future. Hopefully we see her this weekend, but she's got to be ready by the postseason for this Alabama offense to click on all cylinders. And I think, a stat I was looking up last night is something that Tom and I have noted during the games. Alabama's just got to find a way to be more productive in runners in scoring position situations. I don't even necessarily mean getting hits, but I mean moving runners. I mean finding a way to get those productive outs. I looked it up. in the SEC play losses, Alabama, with runners in scoring position, is striking out 42.4% of the time. That is not a productive out. That does nothing for anybody. And a lot of those strikeouts ended innings, or even worse, came with runners on second or third with one out and did not provide a chance to get a run in or just move the runners. I mean, anything like that. Those strikeouts are what it would have been killer for this team, especially in the big situations. They've got to find a way to stop striking out in those big moments. And I think on the other offensive side for Alabama, it's going to be really important to get something from the back half of the order. The best part of Alabama's offense a couple weeks ago was Jenna Johnson kind of being the one to provide the hits and the RBIs in the 5 through 9, 6 through 9 spot. But with Prangy out, they had to move Jenna back up to the 1. We saw her at the 2 in the game where Prangy got hurt, and the back half of the order struggled to get hits. So somebody in that bottom part of the lineup is going to have to do something, anything. Just get on base, draw a walk, something to set up the top of the order. Because if you look at the stats, overall, Cahalan, Johnson, Shipman, Dowling, I mean, they're doing the job. They're doing enough to help Alabama score. But the problem is when they're getting on, the people behind aren't able to drive them in, and the people that are in front of them at the back half of the order aren't getting on to where their hits are driving in runs. So there's just got to be a little bit more lineup connectivity, I would say, when it comes to this team. And I guess the last factor of it is the pitching behind Fouts. I actually think Alex Salter has been phenomenal this year. Her improvement from last season is light years, and I think Lance McMahon is doing really, really good stuff with Salt, and I think she can even get better. I don't think we have seen her best as of yet. I think Lauren Essman has pitched really well at times too, and if she can get her confidence going, and maybe that Marshall game last week was able to do that, then she's somebody that I think Alabama can call upon to come in and get outs if need be. And Jayla Torrance, despite some of the free pass issues that she's had, her opposing batting average is still top 5 in the SEC. And if she had a little bit more innings pitched, I think it would be second all time in Alabama history right now. Probably won't get there, but still, she's been good too. So I think you've got people that you trust to come in and get outs, maybe not throw one-hit shutouts with 14 Ks like a Montana, but I think the pitching largely has been good enough behind Fouts to contend for an SEC title. Unfortunately, there have been other factors that have kind of let them down.
You mentioned Lance McMahon, who has ties to Beth Torina, was on Beth Torina's staff at one point, one of many in the Beth Torina tree. There's another storyline for this weekend. He came over from Illinois, taking over for Stephanie Van Brakel, who's now the head coach at Memphis. How has that transition been for Alabama this year?
I think it's gone really well. Watching the camaraderie between Lance and all the pitchers is really entertaining. Lance is a great guy. We've had a lot of chats over the year, and certainly before games, after games. It was really funny after the Auburn game, chatting with him about LSU and kind of getting a feel for his thoughts on the Tigers and on what that team could look like, his unfiltered thoughts that I probably can't share on this podcast nor on the air. And that was all the while, mind you, while he was helping Sydney Littlejohn Watkins tweak some pitches before she does some professional softball work this summer. So that was really, really cool to watch him also not only teach the players on the current team, but help instruct a current professional. That was kind of eye-opening for me. But I think Lance and these pitchers are really on the same page. He and Montana have a great relationship. I think that we have seen all 4 of them get better throughout the year. I think the things that he is focusing on are the right things, and all in all, he has been a really valuable addition to this staff. Alabama's pitching numbers are better this year, except for home runs allowed, pretty much across the board from last year. And in conference play in particular, they're light years better than they have been the last few seasons. Part of that is because Alabama's been dealing with injuries in the circle, not so much this year, but the improvements can be seen, and I think it's just because Lance has kind of brought in a different mindset, allowed these pitchers to focus on different things that maybe they weren't thinking about before, and it's led to some pretty good success.
Speaking with Gray Robertson, co-host of the Out of the Box podcast. You can listen to that on your favorite podcast devices. Also, co-host of the D1 softball podcast. Calls the games on the radio with Tom Canterbury as well. In Alabama, Tom, the co-host, Out of the Box as well. He's calling games on SEC Network Plus, softball, baseball, a bunch of sports. We'll get to that in the back. It's a lot. Let's talk a little SEC. What's been the biggest surprise to you overall in the SEC this year?
Whew, a lot of places you could take that. I wish I could say Georgia, but I felt like I was on Georgia from the beginning. That was a team that I felt good about. I can't say Tennessee because that was my preseason pick to win the league. I will take pride in getting something right. I think I got that one right. I would say it's South Carolina. This is a team that many of us wrote off, and probably we shouldn't have, but at the same time, it wasn't just us. They were unanimously last in the preseason coaches poll. We looked at the roster and said, did they add enough? Have they brought in the right people? And that was a question that we asked because we were overlooking Donnie Goborn. We did not know when she went to South Carolina what they had. And she has come in and completely turned them around. This is a team now, South Carolina, that I don't think anybody would want to see in a regional. And I'm talking to you, Clemson and Duke. If you host, South Carolina is probably coming to you, and you do not need to take them lightly. This is a team that is much better than we thought, much better from last year. And I think it really shows the job that Bev Smith and I think in particular Josh Bloomer have done with this entire team. Because, we talk about Donnie Goborn, but I think offensively, they just look so much better. Their at-bats look so much better. They just look more confident. They look like they have a plan. And I say that after calling a game where they got no hit by Montana Fouts, but they just look better offensively. And I think we've seen in the SEC when new hitting coaches are brought in, typically there's a year buffer before the numbers start to rise. So to see South Carolina's improvements already here in year one under Bloomer really impresses me. And I think next season, we'll find out what they do with pitching because Goborn's gone, but this could be a team to watch out for that could be one of those, maybe not contenders to win the SEC, but one of those teams that will truly decide who does win because of the series they might take.
And you're right. They're going to be probably in that 2 seed, maybe 3 seed, either at Duke, maybe Clemson, maybe even Florida State. They've been known to be sent there as well. They can bust there as well. So I think those are your 3 likely destinations for South Carolina, which is a good segue to a little bracketology talk. Because you and I do a little bracketology, and now you do your top 16. You do not do 64 like I do because you have a life. You're sane, unlike me, where I'm up at 2 a.m. trying to figure out bubble teams in 63, 64, and where to send them. You do the 1 to 16. But I want to ask you about, I think to me, it's the developing story. And that's the biggest story I think could be potentially on Selection Sunday. And that's the Florida Gators. They have hosted every year a regional in the Tim Walton era. In fact, they have hosted a regional under this format. Since this current format, started in 2005, Florida has hosted every year. The last time Florida didn't host a regional was under a different format in 2004. They are on the bubble as far as hosting. I just bumped them out this week because I didn't like what I saw against Tennessee. Tennessee smoked them with 30 runs. They're on the outside looking in. They could certainly play themselves back in. They have Ole Miss, Kentucky left, and then the SEC tournament. Where do you have Florida at this minute? And your thoughts on this, because this is a big story. We're not used to figuring out where Florida is going on a Selection Sunday.
Well, I'm curious. I'll ask you a question. Who did you bump them out for?
I have Oregon slightly ahead of them.
Okay, see, that's the same thing for me. I had those 2 teams for the final spot, and I don't know how you feel. I feel very confident about 15 teams being a seed. I think that you're pretty close to locking up 15 of the 16 to host regionals. You could make an argument against Clemson with that non-conference strength of schedule. I think Alabama, bad finish. I could see them fall out. I feel good about Northwestern. I feel good about Arkansas. I feel good about everybody above them. But it did come down this morning to Florida and Oregon for that last spot, and I did give it to Florida for now. I think it's really fascinating that it's come to those 2 because we're going to see what the committee truly values. Oregon's got better high-end wins. Florida has more top 50 and top 25 wins. They've got a better SOS. They've got a better non-con SOS, and their bad loss isn't nearly as bad as Oregon's. I think it's going to be really tight. Also, you mentioned the upcoming schedule. pretty favorable. We'll see if Stephanie Schoonover's back for Kentucky, but
Right.
if not, then you've got a weak Kentucky team that's got a really good RPI. So Florida's going to have a couple chances to scoop back in, but I don't know. I mean, it seems like everybody I've talked to, and I chatted with Brady Vernon this morning from D1 as well. He had the same deal: Florida and Oregon for that last spot as of today. I think it's really fascinating, and we'll see what Oregon can do too, because they're actually kind of a quasi Alabama resume for me. They've got a lot of quality wins because they keep winning 1 out of 3 in these big series.
Yeah.
And Alabama's got better neutral site victories than Oregon does, but Oregon, has beaten pretty much all the top teams in the pack. Can't really say that about Florida. They've beaten Georgia twice, they beat Arkansas once, they beat Auburn twice, and then no offense, but their fifth best win is UCF, which is outside the top 25.
Sure.
Oregon's fifth best win is Florida, which is 17 in the RPI. So, again, I feel like it's splitting hairs. I gave the edge to Florida for now, but we'll see. This
No, it's a
weekend
flip.
could completely change things.
It's a flip of a coin, and I'll be honest. I mean, part of when I did this, I did it right after the Monday night game, and fresh off them blowing the lead on Sunday night, Monday night, and they're pitching just not at the Florida level, Gray, that we're used to. And Tim would be the first to say that. I know they got help coming on the way, but Oregon did beat Florida. I know I just spoke to Kelly Gatwood, in fact, on In the Circle, the committee chairperson. She talked about while head-to-head is a criteria. It's not the end-all, be-all, which you and I have issues with. That's a whole other story. But I do wonder, because I think we all on the same page, if Florida and Oregon is this close, if it's pulling hairs, does the committee go with Oregon because of a head-to-head or something like that? Or do they give Tim Walton in Florida the benefit of the doubt because of the streak, because they always host? Obviously, the SEC tournament may also play a factor in that. And you're right. If Florida finishes strong, I think they could pull it out. But this is a fascinating storyline. This is, to me, a couple of big storylines. Selection Sunday. Florida, will they host? And then Arizona, again, Gray, is going to be on the bubble this year, just like last year. It's unbelievable.
Well, one more little note on Florida. I think it's fascinating that, I listened to the interview. I heard the comments about head-to-head. Respectfully, I'm not buying it. I am completely ignoring in my bracketology 2 things, and that's conference standings
Yeah.
and head-to-head. The committee has said they don't care who wins their conference, so I am not caring either as I put together my list. Head-to-head, I mean, we'll see. I think right now Florida's resume has enough that's better than Oregon to make that a moot point. But again, I mean, there are a lot of things on this sheet. I've got them back to back that is, that splits hairs. And again, you could make the argument for either side. I mean, shoot, Oregon with 9 top 50 wins, Florida with 11, but Florida has a losing record against every major metric right up until the top 100. I don't know.
It's tight. I'm with you. I have 14. I feel pretty comfortable. I think Alabama's going to host. I would be stunned if they didn't host. I think the resume is good enough. Arkansas, Clemson. The thing that gives me pause is the non-conference schedule. They by far have the weakest non-conference schedule. They have the fewest top 50 wins, and I'm wondering, Gray, does a team like Auburn, who you just saw, who's in the top 20 RPI, and they're starting to play well, if they get hot, I wouldn't be shocked if we see a flip and maybe Auburn host at Clemson's expense, because Clemson can then go to Auburn or go to Georgia. I'm a little worried about Clemson. I think Clemson needs a good ACC tournament to lock it up. I just worry about because we were in this same situation 2 years ago when we were all shocked to see Clemson show up in the bracket in Tuscaloosa.
I mean, the Clemson thing is really interesting. Again, I said I feel good about it. I think right now there would only be one debate for one spot, and that was the one we were discussing. But I'll tell you what, Clemson did themselves no favors by losing to NC State. When your strength of schedule is horrible, you cannot lose to bad teams. And people are ranting and raving about Alabama losing to Kennesaw State. NC State is only 6 spots better in the RPI than Kennesaw State, and that was a conference game. You can't lose those. You can't. And Clemson, I mean, they're tough to figure out. I just don't know how much the committee is going to hammer teams in this new era, quote unquote, for non-conference strength of schedule. Because I feel like 3 years ago, I would say, oh my gosh, Clemson, I might put them out right now. But I think we're seeing a committee that is more focused on watching the games and just looking at the sheets. And if you watch Clemson, they're a top 16 seed. When you've got somebody like Valerie Cagle, Mackenzie Clark in the leadoff spot, Caroline Jacobson hitting bombs, Allie Miklish is somebody that has been moving up and down the lineup, Cagle hitting. I mean, this is a Clemson team that has the look of a top 16 squad, but how much is the paper going to cover the eyes?
Right.
I don't know. We'll see.
It's a great point. It's a fantastic point. I think too, Clemson's a lot more respected now than it was a couple of years ago when they were sent to Alabama. Right, they were still this new program. Since then, they've hosted a regional. They've been to a super regional. Valerie Cagle, maybe the favorite or among them in the mix for National Player of the Year. I tend to agree. Plus, here's my thing, and that's just where I disagree with the committee. If you want to punish a team for their non-conference schedule, that's fine. But they could, but if you think they're one of the 16 best teams, that's fine. Just knock them in the seeding line. Maybe Clemson is a 15 or a 16 because of their weak schedule. You shouldn't punish them for not, it is what it is. But part of the problem that Clemson has is they got the soft part of the ACC schedule, which is with the imbalanced scheduling kind of convolutes a lot of the scheduling stuff.
Well, I mean, the best punishment you can give a team is to seed them 16th and make them go play in Norman.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's the worst thing you can do to anyone.
I would know very well. Although we wouldn't change it, Gray. Wouldn't change it because we got to host. That's for us. But you're right. Other schools may feel differently. Where do you see? You mentioned that top 8. LSU. I agree with you. I have LSU currently as one of the top 8. They're an interesting team, right? Because they'll drop a series to Auburn, they lose a game to McNeese, but that RPI doesn't change. And then you look at the resume, like, wow, it's a lot better than I thought. Where do you see the SEC team seeding? I think Tennessee should be a lock for a top 8 seed. To me, they're one of the 8 best teams. They're going to win the SEC regular season. I think LSU will be a national seed, whether they're top 8 or not. Who knows? Alabama, Arkansas, Georgia. Those are my SEC seeds. I think we all are on the same page. How do you see the seeding though? Because we're used to seeing the SEC at the top seeds, but it doesn't appear we're going to have somebody in that top 3 line at this point.
Well, that's interesting. So today I did move Tennessee up to 3.
Or FSU? Okay.
Yes, I did. And I'm fascinated because I'm putting more of an emphasis on amount of quality wins. Tennessee's got, it feels like 1,000 top 25 RPI wins, way more than Oklahoma State, Florida State, any of the teams that are in that mix to be the 3 seed. But again, the non-conference strength of schedule is quite blah for the Lady Vols. So does the committee hammer them for that, or do they put an emphasis on, well, hey, you've won all these high-end games in your conference, you've won the out-of-conference games for the most part that you were playing. I think this year they're going to put more of an emphasis on quality wins just based on how topsy-turvy this season's been. So I slid Tennessee up to the 3 spot. Perhaps a little punishment as well to Oklahoma State for dropping 5 in a row. And Florida State, what a weird resume, right? You've got 11 top 25 wins and then 1 in the 26 to 50 range. Yeah. That doesn't make any sense. So I've got Tennessee at 3. Right now I have LSU at 8. So right there on the cut line. This weekend is huge for them. Don't want to say make or break because they've still got more to come after this weekend. But I mean, their resume is so weird. There are a lot of things there that don't suggest being 5th in the RPI. Strength of schedule is good, but they just have 4 RPI top 25 wins. A lot of teams have more than that. They just have 14 top 50 wins, which is relatively low compared to a lot of the teams around them. So LSU feels precarious. It feels like, say, a series loss or even a sweep this weekend could be something that could finally correct the numbers and knock them down 2 or 3 spots for me. And then I have Georgia at the 9 spot, actually. I had a lot of debate internally between Georgia, Texas, and Washington for the 9 spot, and I gave it to Georgia again because of the amount of quality wins that they've got. Their SOS metrics, not as good as Texas or Washington, but I think, again, when you've won the games that you have to play, that should mean something. I've got Arkansas 12, Alabama 13, and then Florida at 16. It is interesting that, more of the SEC teams are going to be traveling, I think, for supers than maybe ever before compared to the top 8. What does that mean? Well, I think we've just seen other teams around the country bolster up their metrics and their profiles this year to where it couldn't be all SEC in that 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 range like it has the last few years. It could also mean we see a lot of interesting upsets in supers when these SEC teams have to travel because, I mean, do you want to play that Georgia offense at home? I wouldn't.
I covered them in the first weekend. I called like 4 of the 5 of their games. We carry the whole tournament. They're explosive offensively there, and I think their pitching's better. Yeah, that's a stacked team. There's no doubt. Arkansas is young, but they're kind of they showed some signs this weekend against Kentucky. Obviously, Kentucky's not healthy at all. Put Alabama aside. How many SEC teams you think can realistic right now? You think like, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if I see them in Oklahoma City.
3. I would say 3. And there are a couple teams bubbling under the surface for me. I think depending on the draw, I could make a case for Auburn to be in there if they have to go to, say, a Duke, right? And then they get through that, and then their super's opponent is Texas. I think they can beat Texas fairly easily, actually. Maybe that would not be the toughest opponent Auburn would have to play in a supers on the road. So there are teams I think that could make a case barring the right draw, but right now, just looking at the numbers, I see 3 SEC teams that I would feel comfortable picking for the World Series right now.
Let's talk a little bit about you as we wrap up. You've got a busy slate this season in particular. You're co-hosting with our friend Tara Henry on the D1 Softball Podcast. You've added that to the resume. That's usually Monday nights, 5. You're obviously still recording the Out of the Box podcast with Tom, which it varies because of your Bama schedules. That's a whole other story in your travels. You're doing that. You're calling the games on the radio for Bama, but you're also calling other sports for SEC Network Plus with Alabama. What is it? Baseball? You called volleyball in the fall? Give me what are the other sports?
Volleyball, soccer, women's basketball, whatever needs to happen. I'm usually there in some capacity.
So give me an idea. How do you handle this schedule? It's a good problem to have, right? It's the thing you and I both dream of, right? Is having all this stuff on it. But it's a maintenance, right? You got to balance things out. So give us an idea. How do you balance that schedule that you've been doing?
Well, I do my best. Murph did not consult with us on some of the midweek road trips as we were trying to put together the podcast schedule. So we've had to create alternative shows in lieu of regular podcasts because we keep having to drive many, many hours or back from places for many, many hours. And that's okay. That's all part of it. It's been a great season. We've had a lot of fun on the road. But yeah, the travel has been something that has kind of been a wrench in everything this year on that side. And in one case with the D1 show with Tara, but I'm really glad that Tara came to me and we talked about doing that in the summer. And that's something that we've had a ton of fun with. It's been really great to get to chat with coaches and players from around the country, to get to truly focus more and more on the national landscape. I try not to talk about Alabama. If we're going to bring up Alabama, I let Tara give her thoughts because I talk about Alabama elsewhere. So I've really, really enjoyed doing that with D1. Obviously, out of the box, this has been, while a hectic scheduling year, as fun a year as I can remember. We're going to record an episode tonight with Amanda Scarborough, and I've created this game that we're going to play. No spoilers. Listen to the pod, but it's something that Amanda and I are really, really excited about. I don't know if Tom is, because I don't know if I've told him it's happening, but we'll see. And that's something that I've had a ton of fun with. We've created a lot of crazy segments and had some of our best off the walls this year, and the numbers have been great. So the podcast is going great. And then finding a way to balance all of that while also doing so many other sports, every softball game, but then also a couple baseball games here and there, and also trying to check up on soccer and volleyball and everything else is happening. Women's basketball, as that was finishing up, trying to balance that with softball in the early part of March, late February. That was sometimes difficult. And I'm hoping we're getting to the point where I can start talking to my family again. I told them that at the beginning of February, like, goodbye, you will see me in 6 months, maybe. Yeah. And even the other day, my mom texted me and said, "Hey, are you getting these? You have an answer." I said, "Oh, sorry, I'm on the air. When is Mother's Day again?" So I'm just trying to get my life in order to where I even know what day it is.
Yeah.
And I'm just doing the best that I can, honestly. And then, of course, I've got 3 days after OKC, and then we go to Nashville for summer softball. So that's
Oh,
just
that's
adding to the list.
just wouldn't know it. The other sports, because I got to call volleyball this year for a full year because they liked my work doing the softball on ESPN Plus, and they wanted some of that synergy to over to volleyball. So they put me on volleyball. I have filled in on soccer, women's soccer this year. I filled in on the men's basketball side. I've pinch hit and filled in on baseball as well. How did that come about? Was that something that was talked about for a while? Is that something? How did that all evolve? Was that something that you were looking for, is to kind of expand on your broadcasting?
Well, I think I always wanted to do as much as I could. I try not to say no to anything, and we've got a pretty hearty rotation of play-by-play people on SEC Network Plus and all the Crimson Tide Sports Network games here at Alabama. So I was just in the mix, and if the schedule worked, I would do it. There have been a couple that have kind of popped up out of nowhere that I'm really thrilled I got to do, and in particular, I think of the soccer Final Eight matchup, Alabama and Duke. That was
Right.
not something that I thought I would do. And then I got the call that said, "Hey, we need someone to do this game. You and Haley, are you in?" I was like, "Heck yeah!" Haley's one of my good friends, and I've really enjoyed working with her. And that was probably, as little soccer as I've done, probably a top three broadcasting moment of my career. Like that was
Yeah.
as unreal a night as I've ever seen. So just trying to do as many sports as possible. I love getting to learn about everything. I love building the relationships with my analysts for each sport, to the point where a lot of us are texting all the time,
Yeah.
even now, even in the off season. And I feel like, to me, the more that you expand the repertoire, the more opportunities you're going to get down the road. And I'm really pleased with some of the work that I've done with a lot of really talented people across many sports.
No, you've done great. I remember that Alabama had a historic year in women's soccer, got to the Final Four. You got to call maybe the most significant win program history in that Elite Eight that you're talking about. It's a moment you won't forget. And you have to kind of balance out because you have different commentators for all the sports. Softball, you've had different analysts on the booth at SEC Network Plus. Then you work with Tom, and you have various roles there. And even on the podcast, you have Tara versus Tom. How do you adjust to each personality?
That's interesting. It's the booth. We'll start with the TV side. It has been just the revolving door of analysts, because just as we start to solidify things, that person moves away. So we keep having to. I hope it's not me. I think it's not me. Usually it's outside factors that, work stuff and whatnot, that cause that. But we've been trying to kind of get into a rhythm with the crew. We've had three different analysts at times in the last 2 years. And I think that I've been really impressed by the work, especially that Kaylee Tao has done this year, kind of just coming out of nowhere. She talked to me 3 weeks before the season in February, late January at trivia night. She said, "Hey, how would I get involved with the SEC Network Plus broadcasts?" And I sent her the right number. And then all of a sudden we were working together opening weekend, and she was absolutely phenomenal. And she's been getting better each and every time that we've been on the air together. Kate Brooks is somebody who is not from this area, played at Notre Dame, lives out in California, but comes in. She'll be here for Friday's LSU game, and we began to know each other well and have had a lot of fun broadcasting together. Sydney Littlejohn Watkins, my partner for multiple years, miss her like crazy. Saw her at Alumni Weekend this weekend and gave her a big old hug. I know she's really excited to be on the call for one of the Florida Ole Miss games this weekend on the Plus. So it's been so fun to get to work with all those people, and you do kind of have to adjust what you talk about with everybody, because I know certain analysts are going to be more comfortable if I throw them a question out of the blue than others will. I know certain analysts will be more comfortable talking about brackets or about RPI math or about stuff like that than others will. Some analysts are totally cool with taking us to break on a rollout. Others are not. So you kind of have to adjust with that on the TV side. And then rolling with Tom, I mean, shoot, that's like just getting back with Waldorf up in the top part of the Opera House, just commentating on things. Just so easy at this point. We don't even really have to say things to communicate with one another. We just are able to just call a game, and we know what each other is thinking, and it comes so easy at this point. Podcasting with Tom, very much the same. Tara and I, at this point, we built enough of a relationship to where I feel comfortable with her. and I feel like we can talk about whatever we need to, and the rapport is strong on that show. So it's just all about adjusting to everybody, and I think trusting the relationships that you've built with them outside of the broadcasting arena, and trusting that friendship, trusting that you know each other, and trusting that you've got each other's backs if somebody says something stupid, which more often than not, they're having to pick me up, but that's okay.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I agree about the relationship part. Yeah, Courtney Lyle I had on during the women's volleyball Final Four, and she talked about her key was to be really friends with her analysts because that would build a rapport, hang out with them, text with them, and I do the same thing. I do games with Francesca, and hey, you just had recently on the podcast. We text each other even when we're not broadcasting. I'm usually texting about Florida and stuff like that, even if or UCF stuff. And right, every analyst is totally different, and it's a fun job. It's a fun deal, and I'm glad. I'm so excited and happy that you're getting more opportunities up there. You've deserved it. You've worked your tail off. And Tom, obviously, what is he going on? 10 years now? How many years now he's doing Bama?
So this is his ninth year
Wow.
overall. This is our seventh year together. So next year will be
7.
Tom's seven. I know. My freshman year of college, that LSU series in 2017, that's where it all began. And now we're in our seventh season. But next year will be Tom's 10th anniversary.
Woo!
I have to think about what surprise I'm going to get for him. Tom, if you're listening, no spoilers for me, but we're going to celebrate big in some capacity.
It's like a special edition of Tom's Eats, right? Like
Tom's hungry, yeah.
hungry. Tom's
Well,
hungry.
well, he does appreciate cookie cakes, but I don't know. That might not be enough. We'll do something
Nah,
for 10 years.
fair enough. No, that's good. All right, tell the audience where they can find you, what you got coming up this week, and obviously all the platforms you'll be on.
Oh boy, what don't I have coming up this week? Well, the Out of the Box podcast will be out on Thursday, so I guess as you're listening to this, it will also have dropped recently. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts, at Out of the Box _pod on Twitter. I've got SEC Network Plus this weekend on Friday. Me and Kate Brooks, Alabama LSU should be a ton of fun. We've got our coaches calls tomorrow. Really excited to chat with Beth Torina again, and of course my dear old friend Patrick Murphy, and then Tom and I will be on the radio Saturday and Sunday on the Crimson Tide Sports Network. Listen on the Varsity app. Just look up Alabama. We'll be right there. And then the Monday after, we've got the D1 Softball Podcast. Me and Tara Henry at D1 Softball on Twitter. Again, wherever you get your podcasts, you can watch live on YouTube, Facebook. There are 1,000 ways to find me. I am easy to track. Probably makes my house easy to rob, but that's okay. And of course, if you want to just figure out what I'm doing on a regular basis, at Gray, Gray _Robertson. Again, I might be way too public out there, Eric, but I don't know. I don't know any other way to be.
Are the movie theme episodes of Out of the Box going to return in the summer and fall there, reviewing movies?
Absolutely. Out of the Box office will return. I had a great chat with Kevin Brown when he was here for the Arkansas series. Kevin and I are like two peas in a pod when it comes to awards movies and the Oscars and all the, big cinema, quote unquote, out there. And he's going to come on. He might do our top 10 movies of the year episode. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, that's something that I'm really excited to do this year. We're hoping to do more episodes because I don't know, Alabama soccer being really good kind of stalled a couple of the things we had planned this past year.
It's a good problem to have. My team's good. I'm sorry. I got to do more stuff.
We're broadcasting another playoff game. Next time.
Next time. All right. Well, Gray, thanks for taking the time. I know it's a busy schedule, but thanks. Always enjoyed talking to you. And I've always appreciated when I've come on your show. I enjoy you and Tom. Me and Tom go way back. I'll never forget Tom when I met him. Bama came down to UCF to play. So always try to tune in when I'm not on the air. So, yes, definitely listen to the podcast. Watch Tom this Friday night. Does great work. Thanks for always joining us here, man. Thanks. Always enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you, Eric. And the Home and Home will be completed very soon. I've got it on the calendar. I think we're nearing the point where we did it last year, so we'll do the In the Circle.
Oh, Victor will be excited, yeah.
Very soon.
I know Victor's like, hey, we let him know because he's working like Tom. Tom and Victor are very similar. They have similar work schedules. You and I tend to just freelance and do interviews by ourselves. But that's good. That's good to know. Look forward to that, sir. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir. Thanks, Eric.